That's important. And so I have the straight line here, right? Which is important. I'm going to kind of teach them some different things on it. We'll talk about the first two. But I have the beginning, which is what? Yeah, which they call that what? We'll call it the open, right? And then I have the end, which is what? Close. And so the key part here is I start here, I have my initial part, and then what's the key part about the straight line? I want you guys to write this down. This is something that's a great reminder, and I just noticed this a lot, like that we're off this a lot. Every single sale is the same. Every single sale is the same, especially in our business. On the listing side, every listing side is the same. Every buyer side is the same. Now, you may argue with that and say, well, that's not the case, but maybe consider it is. There's just a few variables that are different in the meantime. Things like their motivation, their current situation, price. But ultimately, it's going to be the same sale, the same process. And I'll explain how that is in a minute, right? But here's the thing. This is the goal. That's why I want to go back and teach this on today. From the very first word of your mouth right here to the final close right here, every single word and thing that you do has one single goal. What do you think it is? To move them down the straight line. That's it. Why do you think I say that? Because a lot of y'all talking about the crazy issue doesn't have anything to do with the actual sale. I heard it on multiple virtual calls recently. And so what happens is, and she's right, they'll try to take you off. And so ultimately, you have a certain beer that you need to have for yourself. And in the middle, you're going to have the client's going to try to do what? Derail you with things like stories, issues, objections, challenges. And so it's our job as the person, as a salesperson, to do what? Keep them on the line. Now, there's going to be certain laydowns in the process where the laydowns is going to stay in there super easy. The problem is laydowns are few and far between. But we tend to just get laydowns and think that that's just how things are. But the reality is laydowns are the minority. We have majority of people that aren't laydowns that we got to get very good at doing and closing. Does that make sense? And so where does the magic happen? The magic happens right here in these two sections. So we'll put magic here, magic here. You don't want to be strictly on the, you don't want to be only on the straight line itself, because then what happens? Just you talking the whole time. Does that make sense? But here's the deal. I want you to write that every single word you say must have a single goal, to move them down a straight line. And so this is one thing that Belver talks about a lot. With every word, there's no free words. What does that mean? Stay on. There's not chit-chat up. I'm not talking about showings on the front end of the presentation on the listing side. I'm talking about stuff that matters, that's important, that moves toward the sale, because I only have a certain amount of attention I can get from them in their attention time. There's no free words, right? No time for stupid statements, and there's no going off track to Pluto. That's what he talks about, which I think is very, very important. And so what does that mean? I'm very strategic, like a sniper, in my conversation when I say. Now, does that mean I just sound like a robot? No. It means I'm very strategic in my words and how I build rapport with them, and what we talk about, I don't get too far off the line. Does that make sense? Which I think is very, very important for us to look at overall, right? When with every word you say, there's a specific goal in mind. There's three main things, right? Directed. What does that mean? Directed.
It's relevant to what you're trying to do.
Yes, it's relative to where we're going, what we're doing, to them in their current situation, what it is. Number two, it's powerful. Number three, has meaning. It's meaning to our current situation and to get them to the close, ultimately on the end, right? When I have the process here, I'm doing two main things. You remember what they are?
Building rapport and gathering intelligence.
Yep. Chris had. Anybody else know that? So the first thing I'm doing here is developing. There's two ways to look at it. Immediate rapport. So the top here, I want you guys to write developing rapport. Bottom part here, gather massive intelligence. Why?
So you know what they're thinking and you know what their motivation is.
And I'll talk about that in a minute. How to do that. But that's the first part of the straight line, right? How do I gather intelligence? What am I looking for? Write this down. Number one, identify their needs. It's similar to what we talked about last week, but identify their needs. I'll put ID needs. And there's multiple parts that we'll talk about. Number two, identify any core beliefs. This is important. What does that mean, you think? Identify core beliefs. What does this mean?
What they believe is true.
Yeah, what's an example?
All agents.
I'm not paying 6%. That's a core belief, right? You walk in the door and they say, I'm not paying 6%. That shows you that's a core belief, which I have to make sure I tackle that the entire time. That was you that had it, right? Sorry. That was you. Sorry. It was you. So if they walk in and tell me that, that's a core belief. Now, hey, tell me more about that. What makes you believe that, right? I was in business. Okay, how do the numbers actually break down? Do you know what they actually net? What's the average agent spend on marketing? Do you know? And I want to unpack that because I know that's a world view that I have to destroy and rebuild for them. Does that make sense? Whatever it is in that scenario, which is very important. Number three, past experiences. Wow, what's that going to tell me? which is deeper though, but what else? What about that? That's going to tell me what potential objections are. It's going to tell me how much they're going to trust me. It's going to talk about where they're coming in the straight line based on their certainty. I'll talk about that in a minute. This is where I'm getting deep in understanding this stuff, and just there's a lot of fundamentals we're missing. And I just look at, man, if we just master these fundamentals, it'll be so much easier for us to really kind of get really good at this. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm like, how do we just, like we have all the tools, how are we still getting our ass up a little bit in this market? And it's like, dude, this stuff right here, we have to master these basics. And it's just so easy to do once you just understand the psychology to just rip apart all the walls everybody else has around them that we're dealing with. Number 4, I think that's 4, right? Yeah, identify their values. What would that be? ID values, what would that mean?
What's important to them?
What's important to them? What drives them, right? What are they looking to do in terms of like their needs, and like, is money what drives them, or is getting to their family what drives them? I'm looking to see kind of what their drivers are, but really what do they believe about the world? And that's really kind of their story. I'm doing that also if I'm at their house, listening to a presentation, what the stuff they have in their house, I'm looking at their desk, I'm looking at everything they have, right? If they're coming into me as a buyer, I'm digging that through their story, where they're from, what they did as their job. All those things matter in terms of that. I've had a few people here I've talked to, they're multi-million-dollar buyers or sellers. I'm like, what do they do? And you're like, I don't know. Like if you don't know their job, that gives you not a lot of info or intel on how they think. You guys with me on this? So if they're an engineer or an accountant, they tend to be more analytical. I'm going to play the game that way. Does that make sense? A business owner who's a D personality, I'm going to move faster, and I'm going to really blow the ego up a lot more. Does that make sense? But that's something that's very, very important to look at. So for example, they're high-end client. I want to know where they went to college, what they did, what they major in. I want to know all that stuff. And if I show up to them, that meeting knowing all that, their respect for me and their certainty for me is going to go up. Why? Because I did the homework and the research it takes to know about them, right? Very important piece there. Number 5, identify their financial situation. Now, I'm not going to play mortgage broker, but I'm going to ID kind of where they're at, what they're looking for, their price range, things like that. And the 6th one is really kind of the most important. Identify where their pain lies. What does that mean? Looking for 2 things. You guys remember, besides Chris? Similar. They're buying motive, looking for dominant buying motive, and that would be really kind of pain, which is broke down. What's keeping them up at night? Like, what is it keeps them laying up at night thinking? And the second one, what's their biggest worry? Those are the 6 main things I'm looking for. I'm gathering intel. This is the beginning, right? So in the beginning, I'm doing, obviously, one main thing initial. What am I doing? Developing massive report, right? Immediate report. And how I do that, and here I'm gathering massive intelligence, which I think is important to look at, understand with that. Now, what do I do as I get to that basic thing? I move them down the line. What's the next most important thing? You guys remember? 3 basic tenets. He talks about this. I'm trying to get one that works. Number 1. Anybody remember?
The authority.
Close. Force directly, which means I take immediate control of the sale. Be a force. What does that mean? My certainty, my energy coming to make everything. So that's my greeting, how I shake their hand, my energy. All that stuff matters because they're judging the first few seconds, right? Same thing on the telephone call. My certainty matters, right? My initial phone call and how I show up. If I call like I'm supposed to call, they're going to want to listen to me. If I call like I'm not supposed to call, they're not going to want to listen to me. And you can listen to yourself in your own phone calls and how you sound to make that really kind of understanding of where you're at. Must take immediate control of the sale. Number 2, you must engage in massive intelligence gathering. We talked about that. Number 2, massive intelligence gathering. Second tenet. And number 3, third part of this, build even tighter rapport on a conscious and unconscious level. That's the important part. Tighter rapport on conscious, unconscious level. What does that mean? Conscious, unconscious. Tell me about that. What's conscious rapport?
Or you tell me you're like from the same town.
Yep, that would be like what? What's the word I'm looking for? Linking. Right? You nailed it, the linking, right? So, hey man, you got this. We're building conscious rapport. What do you think unconscious rapport is?
Physical mirroring.
Certainty, how you show up. Your voice, your tonality, your body, the way you show up. That's the unconscious. That's the gut feeling about you they're scoring you the whole time, which is super important. You have to have both. We'll talk about this, but that's one thing a lot of people don't realize, and that's why your tonality matters, recording yourself matters. Because if you seem nervous or fidgety, Bob Corker, my old coach, used to make me set a video up in the corner and video the presentation. Not just audio, video. And you notice things and how you sat and how your arms did. It made a big difference. But that's how committed we were to mastering that process, right? And so you look at yourself, it does make a difference. You'll tend to say the same words over and over. You'll tend to do things with your arms. You'll tend to sit back and not be in a rapport that shows certainty, which makes a big difference in how you do that. So that's the key part. Now, why is every sale the same? Anybody know? Same what? Similar. What do you think that is? Yep. And what am I looking to do? How do I close? They're all the same because you have to get to 10, 10, 10. Right? What does that mean? You guys remember this from before? This is why it's so important to go back and review this stuff. Yes. I must have a 10 out of 10. For me, what's the second one? Product. Number 3, company. Which one's the most important one? You, right? That's the key part I look at, right? Every single sale is the same because the same 3 core elements must line up in any prospect's mind before you have any shot at closing them. Period, right? You have to have all, and he talks about this in the other training where it's like a combination. You have to unlock the combination, and to do so, you have to get all 3 numbers. If I get 2 of the 3 numbers on a lock done, what happens? Doesn't open, right? I get 2 of the 3 right, doesn't matter. In this case, I need 3 of the 3, which is very important. And so, you have a 1 here. When they start out, they come in, they're at a 1. I get them at the end, they're at 10. I need 10 in all 3 parts of that in terms of what we do. Now, here's the crazy part. What determines where they come in and sale at on 1 to 10? What determines where they come in at in terms of 1 to 10? So some will come in at 3 or 4, some come in at 1, some come in at 0. Trust, which really comes from what?
Marketing.
Preconceived notions. So their preconceived notions drive that for you. Now, there's 3 main things in that. Number 1, their initial gut reaction, which is like what Ryan said. So I want you guys write that. Their gut reaction about what? Yeah. Judging out of you. The second you walk in, how you show up, how you dress, your tonality, how you shake their hand, do you look them in the eye or not, right? Do you know their name? A lot of people, if you don't notice their name a lot, that's very important. So if I have an interview, Ryan, somebody got to know their name. And then guess what I do? I say their name over and over. If I have a client, and when I used to go to listing presentation, I'll make sure I always wrote the name on the folder. Because I didn't want to get in a situation where I forgot their name. And I had that happen a few times, and I didn't have the certainty I needed because I didn't know their name off the top of my head. Make sense? Which is very, very important to do. With that, second one, their research. Somebody mentioned that, right? Their research on you. That's why the reviews are so important right now with us. And getting those, again, we had a bunch of closings last week and not enough reviews. We need everybody to make sure to get reviews right now because everyone is going online researching. And then 3, their preconceived notion comes down to you, the salesperson, which is what? How would you clarify that? Their initial judgment of you. Yep. Number 1 is how you dress, how you show up, your haircut, everything. And they're doing it. I've had people call, cancel for every reason in the world. This guy wore shorts, this guy wore this lady wore this, she said this. Like they're judging, and they'll stick to that the rest of the time, which I think is very, very important to look at, right? So where they start at in the process is all based on their preconceived notions. And now I'm looking to get to a 10 out of 10. Now, when I get to the 10 out of 10, there's 2 things I have to get to here. Anybody remember? I'm looking for the word here, certainty. There's 2 types. Remember what it is? Logical. What was the other one? Emotional. So there's logical certainty and emotional certainty in all 3 of these situations in terms of what they do. What's logical certainty? What's some examples of that?
Presentation, the information,
Yes.
the numbers.
The idea makes sense, right? The things add up. This is why you don't, and this is why people screw this up in the buyer presentation and the seller presentation. When I watch you guys skip stuff, what you end up doing is you break the link of logical certainty. So how our presentation is designed through NLP, it programs their mind to work a certain way. But if I skip around too much, I don't have the link of the logical certainty, and so you lose that with them because they can't follow you with that. Does that make sense? That's why you don't skip around. That's why I hit every box. It's very important because that's where logical certainty comes in. The idea makes sense. The things add up, right? It's a positive value proposition, and the features and benefits make sense. In their mind, they have basically a positive cost-benefit ratio, meaning that the benefit is way more than the cost. And that's with you, with the product and the company. Does that make sense? What does logical certainty kind of break down is that they can tell a story to someone else from start to finish. That makes a big difference. On our listing side, we notice this. If they see the video beforehand, what do?
They're already pre-sold.
They're pre-sold. They tell you how the whole thing works. And so that's why I'm noticing on a lot of virtual appointments, especially the newer guys, is you got to make sure you're taking time to text them the link to the video before the meeting. I've noticed that's not getting done in Sierra. And so if they watch that video, before they come in, what happens to their preconceived notion and their initial logical certainty? It's super high. So if I send the video, now they're coming in at 6 or 7. Logical certainty makes my job so much easier. But if I don't take time to slow down and send the video to them, I'm not going to have them higher on that scale of logical certainty. Does that make sense? Which I think is super important. So the logical certainty, how your product works. I'm going to write that down for you guys. Logical. How it works. They need to make sure you're stacking value so it's so valuable they think, man, this thing might cost 10%. Number 2, why it makes so much sense. You know why? So in our case, we're showing them how the initial business model is broken in our industry, right? Here's how most people operate, here's how their process works, versus here's how we work, and here's how we operate, and this is how we're going to get you a better result, right? Not to mention our training, our certifications, things we have there. And number 3, why it's such a great deal. For us, it's going to be what? That's what the front page of the listing side, we show them, hey, look, here's how we're going to get you 25,000, 50,000, whatever it is, 15,000, and you add that to the time value of money, that all of a sudden turns to 275,000. That's what ups the stakes to make the decision that much greater and that much more important. Does that make sense? Now, that's logical. Logical is my actual piece of the presentation. That we got nailed out for you guys pretty good as long as you do what? Follow the process. Quit skipping around, right? Quit trying to reinvent the wheel. Just do it how it's supposed to be done. Even me, when I was doing it, as the guy on the TV and the billboards, all the other stuff, with all the endorsements, I went through every box on the presentation every single time because I needed to have an airtight, logical case for them. Does that make sense? You have to have that. And the other side of that is emotional. What's emotional certainty? This is a hard one.
Where they feel comfortable dealing with you?
Yes, so the emotional is based on gut feeling. You guys write that down. It's based on gut feeling. So where does that come in? What drives that, you think?
I think your confidence, the tonality, all the things.
Your energy, right? So, and it can't be like over the top energy, my certainty. And we talk about this all the time. The thing that sells more than anything in sales is certainty. Your own certainty and who you are and how you show up. Now, if I have a great credit score with myself and my identity's high because I've done the work and I've studied and I've learned, what happens to my certainty? It goes up. And so sometimes they're just reading you and your energy. It sounds uncertain. You're trying to think of the next word because you haven't practiced enough or you forgot the actual closes. And so their gut feeling just feels like something's off, and that's why they don't go with you. But you know the basic stuff, but the emotional piece is what they're really scoring you against. And that's that primal instinct that we have as humans that just say, do I like this person? Is he or she going to rip me off or not? Are they going to do what they say they do or not? Well, how do I know that? Well, if I don't do what I say I do to myself, I'm not going to come across as super confident in how I show up to these other people. Does that make sense? And that's why I led with identity, which identity means so much. Because I need identity of certainty to be able to give certainty to people for them to feel that identity of certainty from me to them. Number 2, it must be something that must be good, right? What does that mean? It tells them, hey, look, this is where I lock in the emotional piece of how I'm going to help them get there. So what am I doing here? I'm going to start making sure I'm talking about things what? I kind of wrote this down here. Just imagine how great you're going to feel when. That's where the emotional certainty comes in. So, hey, Ryan, this is how I'm going to help you guys get to a place where you don't have to worry about stairs or your baby anymore, right? This is how we're going to make sure that how's it going to feel to you when you get to a place that you're talking about where you can chip a putt with your son in the backyard to the green. Those are things that are emotional. If I can get the emotional piece up, what happens to decisions? The money doesn't matter. That's exactly right. He literally says that in that part, right? If you get to that place where they got to have it based on emotion, the money's not an issue. And so with us, if I can tie the pain enough to the emotional outcome that they want to get to, the money doesn't matter. And so not paying 6%, why don't you figure out, hey, what's the pain? What are the issues they have? What's their previous stuff? I start to unpack that worldview, but I'm going to tie that later on to the emotional piece of like, what's it going to look like if you don't sell it? You try to sell it yourself for 6, 8, 12 months, or you're going to give your hard-earned equity away, right? No one's going to be able to show it, whatever it is. I'm going to go through that process of that, and we'll tie the outcome what they ultimately want. Does that make sense? Which makes a big difference with that. What's the key word of emotional certainty? I want you guys to write this down. Future pace. What does that mean? I've got to paint a picture for them what? To show them what life's going to be like when they do what? Make a decision. Yep, make the decision about the house. Listing side, hey, look, this is how things will be when you go with me. I want to make sure every detail is covered for you. We're going to make sure that we bring buyers in with our team. We're going to make sure that I communicate with you like I'm supposed to, unlike the last agent you have. They need to feel that from you that I'm solving the problem, right? The logical stuff makes sense, but the emotional side, hey, Ryan, here's what things are going to be like when you work with me, just so you know. I'll make sure we do this, make sure we do this, make sure we do this, because I know people like you had bad situations before. I'll make sure that you don't have to worry about that with me. You stick with me, it's going to be taken care of. That's what they want from you is, hey, look, I'm your guy, I'm your girl, I'll make sure I get it done. Does that make sense? And so here's the deal. Which one do you think is more important? Emotion. What else? You guys feel, everybody feeling emotion? What's Belford says is not either one, it's got to be both. If I have massive emotional certainty, but no logical certainty, what happens? They can't justify it in their mind. I really want it, but I just know if I can trust this guy or not. Things that really make sense. I want the outcome, but I can probably do it myself. And so, like, for example, lady 6%, she wants to do a FSBO. I have to show her through logical emotion how it's simply impossible for someone like her to sell her property for the most amount of money in the current marketplace. I'll break it down. Who you got showing it for you? How they're going to show it? You don't actually live here. Hey, what's your experience in getting photos done? What's your experience in understanding how marketing works? What's your experience in negotiation? Right? I'm going to go through and break all the logical pieces down, and then I tie that with emotion. That's how you get the sale. In many cases, we're too heavy on one, not the other. Does that make sense? And so the only way, people don't buy on logic, they buy based on emotion, and they justify the decision with logic. We heard that a million times since like the timeshare days, right? But people don't buy on logic, but they buy based on emotion, but they use the logic to justify it. Hey, I really want this outcome. I think Ryan can do it. I think he's the best fit for me. This guy seems super confident. He called me a lot of times. And ultimately, the logic he's giving me makes sense, and I can justify paying the 6%, right? That's the key part I want to make sure I'm looking at. Same thing the buyer side. A lot of y'all, the presentation's pretty good, but what are you lacking? Your own emotional certainty. And that comes from practicing, from role-playing, from showing up, from learning, from making sure that my together, right? That's very important for me to make sure I do. And so that's what it was. And the key part for the emotion part, hey, this is how we're going to help you blank. This is how I'm going to help you blank. This is how the product's going to help you blank. This is how my company's going to help you blank. And so I want to make sure I get to a 10 out of 10 based on all these. And there's going to be two of them, emotional and logic. And so the cool part about anybody that hasn't been through the straight line certification, it's a little different than the other course. It's a little bit more advanced. It's a little bit newer. What are the 3 10s? Me, the product, and the company. And the 3 tenets we have in the basic first part is what? Must take control of the sale, right? Initially, with my certainty and energy. That's what we also have our intent statement, which is us doing what? Setting a frame and taking control of the sale. Number 2, I must engage in massive intelligence gathering, which is detailed discovery, which we just talked about last week. And number 3, I must build an even tighter rapport based on conscious and unconscious level. And so the conscious piece is the logic, the linking of how I do it. And then on top of that is my certainty and my energy. And so what will my unconscious level of gathering intel would also be the way I show up, the way I lean in, the way I'm curious about my questions. If I'm just grilling them about questions, they're going to shut down. But if I come from a place of curiosity and not judgment, it makes a big difference in how I do that as well. Does that make sense? Which I think is very important for us as well.